Welcome to the deep dive. Let's jump straight into something happening right now on Thailand's border with Cambodia.
Yeah, we're focusing today on these recent tensions, specifically a border clash near a place called Trong Buk.
We've got quite a bit of material to work through for this deep dive, including a pretty detailed YouTube transcript, which gives some, well, very specific insights.
And as the sources seem to lay it out, this isn't just, one isolated incident. It's really a situation layered with history, strategic moves, some quite complex and, frankly, tricky negotiations.
And the potential for a legal battle, right,
Yeah.
at the international level.
Exactly. Big potential for that.
So our mission today is to try and peel back these layers using the material you shared with us. We want to pull out the key facts, understand the perspectives from both sides, at least as they appear in these sources.
Yeah, and figure out what the critical takeaways are for you so you're really well informed about what seems to be an escalating situation.
Yeah, and we're going to focus heavily on the events that unfolded specifically around, what was it, May 28th and 29th.
That's right, those 2 days are key.
And believe me, it gets complicated really fast. Like, who actually fired first? What was really agreed upon in those high-level talks the day after?
And is this whole dispute maybe heading towards an international court? Could we see a repeat of history?
Okay, yeah. Let's try and unpack all of this. All right, let's rip into the first section then. The source gets right into the immediate clash itself. Happened near Chongbuk, May 28th.
And the sources confirm there were tragically Cambodian casualties.
Oh.
Initially reported as one fatality and injuries, but later confirmed as a second fatality as well.
And straight away, there's this point of contention right in the sources. Who actually started the firing?
Well, the Thai military perspective, as it's presented in the material we have, is that Cambodia fired first.
Okay, why do they believe that? What's the reasoning given in the source?
So the source explains that Thai forces were approaching the area at what they call military dawn, around 5:30 a.m.
Yeah, that sounds quite specific.
It is. It's a tactical thing.
Yeah.
The Thai military says they were moving in to reclaim territory they believe Cambodia had encroached upon. So the thinking, according to the source, is that Cambodia, maybe anticipating this move, fired when they saw the Thai forces moving.
And the source emphasizes the Thai military claims they followed procedure, gave a warning.
Exactly. They claim they issued a warning for the Cambodian personnel to leave the area before their forces actually entered, sticking to their, standard protocol for reclaiming territory.
Okay, so that's the immediate trigger. But what about this Cambodian encroachment that kind of precipitated the whole thing? Where was it?
Right. The source specifies the location near the Paya Sataban tree line. And this wasn't minor. It was reportedly about 150 meters deep into what Thailand considers clear Thai territory.
150 meters. That's significant.
Very. And the sources make a point of distinguishing this. It's not like the long-standing overlapping claim areas, the Morakot Triangle, which are handled differently. This was land the Thai side views as, well, unequivocally theirs.
And they weren't just like standing there, they were actively doing something.
Correct. The source details that Cambodia had reportedly been gradually encroaching for months. And critically, just before the clash, they were actively digging trenches. Using a tractor or a backhoe, the source mentions, in this specific area.
Wow, digging trenches. That shows a clear effort to sort of fortify the position, right? Make it more permanent.
Seems that way, yes.
Now, this detail about gradual encroachment over months, it raises a question the sources touch on. Why wasn't this noticed sooner if it was 150 meters deep?
Yeah, it's a fair question. The source suggests a couple of possibilities. Maybe this particular area wasn't patrolled as regularly recently. Also, apparently Cambodia's nearest village was closer to this encroachment point than the nearest Thai military base.
Ah, so maybe easier for them to move people and equipment like that tractor in without being seen right away.
Potentially, yes. That's what the source implies.
And the sources also mentioned something related that happened earlier, back in February, a pavilion.
Yes. They connect this to an event on February 28th, reporting that Cambodia burned down the Trimuk Sala pavilion that was a structure previously used for joint patrols, apparently.
Okay.
And after burning it, they then reportedly encroached into this Paya Sataban area and started the digging. The sources also say they apparently felled trees to block Thai access.
Blocking access, too, sounds quite deliberate.
It suggests a strategy, yes, making it harder for Thai forces to even reach the area.
So after the May 28th clash, what's the immediate situation on the ground described in the sources? Is it still tense?
Very much so. The source indicates a standoff continues in the area, and there's a really concerning report coming from military sources cited in the material.
What is it?
that after their partial withdrawal from the immediate clash point, Cambodia has reportedly laid landmines right in the zone where the clash occurred.
Landmines. Wow. Okay, that adds a whole other really dangerous layer to this.
Definitely. Okay, so with the immediate fighting sort of paused, where did things go? Negotiation table, right?
Yes, very quickly. Our sources describe these high-level talks happening on May 29th, the very next day.
Who was actually involved? Was it top-level government or more military?
Well, the sources don't explicitly name, say, prime ministers, but they strongly suggest it was military commanders-in-chief who were the key figures, probably, coordinating with higher government officials.
Makes sense.
And it's noted in the sources that it was actually Cambodia who initiated the request for this negotiation after the clash.
Interesting. Okay, so what was the main proposal from the Thai side during these talks?
The source indicates Thailand proposed a mutual withdrawal 200 meters from the Payasadaban tree line area. So suggesting both sides pull back from that immediate, very tense zone.
And how did Cambodia respond to that during the meeting, according to the source? This sounds like a key moment.
It really is. And this is where it gets, quite complicated, and the sources really highlight the confusion or disagreement. The source says Cambodia explicitly stated during the meeting that they could not withdraw from the Payasadaban area.
Couldn't withdraw, even though Thailand says they just encroached there.
Exactly. They apparently claimed it unequivocally as their own territory and asserted they were already present there beforehand. So flat refusal on that point.
Wow. Okay, so that refusal must have led to the discrepancy that came out publicly later?
Precisely. The Thai understanding coming out of that meeting was an agreement on basically 3 points: keep things calm, and a mutual withdrawal only from the immediate clash point, which they saw as separate from the main Payasadaban encroachment area itself.
But Cambodia's public statement was different.
Very different, according to the source. Their statement afterward, which the source characterizes as a unilateral claim by Cambodia, included what they called a 4th point, referred to as item 13 in their internal reporting mentioned in the source. And this point stated they would not withdraw from their area, meaning specifically that Payasadaban tree line zone. So the Thai side saw this as a kind of trick or a misrepresentation.
The source strongly suggests it was perceived exactly like that by the Thai side. A trick, or a deliberate unilateral claim by Cambodia that directly contradicted what they thought was the joint understanding reached in the room.
This raises a big question then. Why didn't the Thai negotiators immediately challenge that refusal, or the later public statement, more forcefully during the meeting itself?
That's a key question the sources try to address. They offer several potential reasons, painting a picture of, a challenging negotiation environment.
Like what?
For one, the meeting was apparently quite short, only about 90 minutes, which, for high-level talks on something this sensitive, is brief.
Yeah, not much time.
It was also described as maybe more informal than, say, a formal diplomatic negotiation. The focus of the discussion might have shifted around a bit during the meeting. Plus, the Cambodian commander-in-chief's closing remarks were reportedly quite positive, even promising to discipline any non-compliant troops.
So maybe that smoothed things over, made it seem like they were on the same page.
Possibly created that impression. The source also points out that Thai negotiators were primarily military, so operating with a military mindset, perhaps less experienced in navigating what the source describes as Cambodia's tricky negotiation tactics.
And they already knew Cambodia was resistant to withdrawal, right? From earlier talks.
Yes, the source notes that, from prior VTC talks video teleconferences. So the refusal itself wasn't maybe a total shock, but how the outcome was framed publicly, that was seen as the problem.
And just to add another layer here, the source mentions something pretty concerning happened the very morning of those May 29th talks, before they even sat down.
Yes, this really shows the complexity. Despite agreeing to talks for that afternoon, Cambodia was reportedly still present in the area that morning and fired shots, the source mentions 20 rounds, specifically at Thai forces.
While agreeing to talk?
Yes, and Thai forces who had actually pulled back slightly from the immediate clash point, precisely to avoid confrontation before the negotiation. So, shots fired just hours before they were meant to discuss de-escalation.
That's quite something. Really complicates the picture of those talks.
Absolutely. Now, the situation then took another significant turn, moving beyond just the ground situation in the immediate talks. Cambodian Prime Minister Hun Manet announced they're preparing to raise the dispute over 4 specific areas to the International Court of Justice, the ICJ.
4 areas, not just Payasadaban where the clash was.
Correct. Via the Joint Boundary Commission, the JBC, that's the technical body, The sources list the areas mentioned by Hunmene, Tamon to Krabi, the Morakot Triangle, and yes, the Payasadaban clash area too.
So widening the scope significantly.
Hugely. And the sources kind of view this move by Cambodia as playing two faces. Pursuing military action on the ground, the encroachment, the clash, those reported landmines, and now escalating with legal threats at the same time, suggests a potentially pre-planned strategy.
Using every tool available, it seems. Now, Thailand's stance on the ICJ has historically been quite firm, hasn't it, according to the sources?
It has. The source states clearly, Thailand isn't a party to the court's compulsory jurisdiction. It doesn't accept the ICJ's authority over this specific boundary issue. They've been consistent on that.
The source also presents an expert view suggesting Thailand might actually be at a disadvantage if this does end up going to court anyway. Why would that be?
Well, what's highlighted is the perception that Cambodia appears really prepared for a legal fight. The expert view, as reported in the sources, suggests Cambodia might rely heavily on historical maps, specifically mentioning that disputed French 1,200,000 map.
The map that's often seen as problematic.
Exactly. The source describes it as potentially intentionally problematic, drawn in a way that created ambiguities along the border, often favoring, well, the Cambodian interpretation based on watershed lines.
What counter-evidence does Thailand have, then, according to the sources?
Thailand reportedly has aerial photographs, and evidence aimed at showing the digging at Payasadaban is recent, citing the presence of new red soil compared to older settled soil.
Okay, so arguing the encroachment is new, not historical.
Right, indicating it happened relatively recently, specifically since that February incident with the pavilion burning. The source does note, though, that while this evidence was apparently brought to the May 29th negotiation, maybe it wasn't fully leveraged or used to directly challenge Cambodia's claims during that short meeting.
And what are Cambodia's main legal arguments reportedly? What do they base their claims on?
The sources mentioned a couple of things. They cite historical presence, arguing they were in these areas before the 2000 MOU. That's the Memorandum of Understanding on Boundary Issues.
Okay.
And they also reportedly rely on those old French treaties and the historical maps we mentioned, arguing these place the areas on their side, often using those watershed lines as the basis. And if we just circle back quickly to the immediate aftermath of the clash, the sources also mentioned Cambodia lodged a very strong diplomatic protest, didn't they?
Oh, yes. The sources describe it using really powerful language, demanding punishment for the Thai soldiers involved, calling it an unprovoked attack. Very strong words.
And Thailand's official response to that protest, how did they frame it?
They essentially upheld the Thai military's right to protect sovereignty and to act in proportionate self-defense, citing both international law and Thai law, a standard, firm response asserting their right to operate on what they see as their territory.
This whole situation, especially Cambodia's stance on Payasadaban just not being disputed in their eyes, it must make negotiation incredibly difficult.
It really does. The source points this out clearly. Cambodia insists the Payasadaban area is not disputed. They just claim it's theirs, period.
Even though Thailand's view, and the evidence they cite, suggests it crosses the borderline that's been practically recognized for years.
Exactly. This refusal to even acknowledge the encroachment into what Thailand sees as its own territory makes finding common ground really, really challenging. The sources also bring in that historical context joint patrols that apparently did recognize the Payasadaban area as being on the Thai side.
So it seems Cambodia's strategy might be claim more, maybe hope to gain some ground in the negotiation.
That's how the sources seem to interpret it. Claiming more territory than they might realistically expect to keep, aiming to secure at least some advantage in the process. But this isn't just about soldiers and maps and courts, is it? Our sources also point to pressures happening closer to home, within Thailand itself, adding this whole domestic political dimension.
Yes, absolutely. Some observers mentioned in the sources are drawing lines, connections between these recent tensions and border issues that flared up under different Thai governments in the past.
And there's speculation raised in the material too, right? About whether maybe underlying political or business interests connected to Cambodia might be playing some role behind the scenes.
Questions definitely raised in the sources, yes.
This brings up some, controversial comments highlighted in the sources, specifically attributed to former Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra.
Indeed. The sources discuss comments reportedly made by Thaksin about potentially designating certain border areas as no man's land simply because they're seen as just forest, maybe lacking significant value.
And the sources emphasize how badly that landed with the Thai military.
Oh, Deeply hurtful and offensive is how the sources describe the military's perception.
Why such a strong reaction? What's the core belief there, according to the sources?
Because the Thai military's fundamental principle, as strongly emphasized in the material we looked at, is that not one single inch of Thai territory should ever be lost, period. Regardless of what it looks like, forest, rock, whatever, or its perceived economic value. It's about sovereignty, national pride, built on past sacrifices. It's deeply ingrained. And what's also interesting here is the perceived impact, mentioned in the sources, of the relationship between Thaksin and Cambodian leader Hun Sen, that close personal tie.
Right. Some feel that this closeness might make Thailand maybe less likely to use force in these border situations, or alternatively, that Cambodia might be taking advantage of this relationship, perhaps thinking Thailand's response will be softer because of those political connections at the top.
And this seems to create a real tension, doesn't it, between the military's perspective on the ground and the government's overall policy for handling this Paya Sataban encroachment.
Yeah, the sources describe it clearly. The Thai military apparently has a desire, maybe even an instinct, to use force to reclaim that encroached territory. But the government's stated policy is prioritizing peaceful negotiation, considering the broader economic and social impacts of any conflict.
So the military feels constrained.
That's the sense you get from the sources, a feeling of frustration, being held back. Phrases like they want to fight but have to clench their teeth are used in the material to describe their mood. They seem to believe they could resolve the Paya Sataban situation militarily if they were allowed to.
But the sources also note Cambodia is now pretty well dug in there, right?
Exactly. They've established a significant fortified presence now, which makes any potential military action much more complex, much riskier, and potentially much costlier than it might have been earlier.
This whole dynamic, this tension, also brings up the idea of using economic leverage, doesn't it? Specifically, border closures.
Yes. The sources mention this possibility, closing border checkpoints. There was apparently news circulating that suggested a temporary closure was considered, but then maybe braked or stopped by a specific government figure. Deputy PM Phumtham is mentioned.
Although the military source quoted in the transcript clarifies things a bit there.
How so?
They say that while they hadn't officially proposed closing checkpoints yet, it definitely remains an option on the table, something they're considering as a potential pressure tactic.
And the rationale for even thinking about something like that, economic pressure.
Yeah, it basically comes down to Cambodia's significant reliance on trade with Thailand. Shutting down those checkpoints would have a clear, immediate, and pretty painful impact on the Cambodian economy. That's the potential leverage.
But that's a double-edged sword, isn't it? There'd be domestic pushback in Thailand, too.
Absolutely. The sources acknowledge this. While you might find public and maybe some analyst support for using border closure as leverage against Cambodia, it would undeniably hurt Thai businesses and traders who operate across that border. And the sources note they would almost certainly object, quite strongly.
Finally, on this domestic front, the sources touch on some perceived communication issues, maybe political missteps in how the situation's been handled.
Yes, criticism has apparently been directed at certain government figures, like Phumtham again, not just over the handling of the border closure news, but also maybe for past statements they might have made, even if unrelated to this specific incident, like previous remarks about potentially withdrawing from other border areas somewhere else.
It just shows how sensitive this whole topic of territory is domestically, doesn't it? Any perceived misstep gets amplified.
Very much so. So trying to wrap all this together, where does the situation stand right now, and what are the potential paths forward based on what the sources tell us?
Well, as of the reporting in the sources, the standoff is still ongoing on the ground. And really chillingly, the sources reiterate that report about Cambodia allegedly laying landmines in that former clash zone near the Paya Sataban tree line after they partially pulled back.
A very dangerous element. What's the immediate next step supposed to be in terms of process, the JBC meeting?
Yes, the Joint Boundary Commission, the JBC, that's the technical body. A meeting was reportedly scheduled for mid-June, but the sources note, crucially, that Cambodia hasn't actually confirmed the date for that meeting yet, so it's still up in the air.
And should we hold our breath for that JBC meeting to solve everything quickly? What do the sources suggest?
Probably not, unfortunately. The sources strongly suggest that these formal JBC processes are, well, historically very slow. They tend to get bogged down in technical details and often don't fully resolve immediate, tense flare-ups like this Paya Sataban encroachment. That kind of situation needs prompt de-escalation, not necessarily a years-long technical demarcation process.
Are there other ways to talk? Other mechanisms mentioned?
Yeah, the sources mention the existing structures like the General Boundary Commission, GBC, the Regional Boundary Committee, RBC, and even local level talks between commanders. But the sources also highlight a suggestion that maybe a higher level, perhaps ad hoc committee needs to be formed specifically for this situation, given what's described as its emergency nature, something more responsive.
And if these negotiations, whatever form they take, fail, what are the potential negative outcomes highlighted?
Well, the sources bring up that stark comparison made by Cambodian leader Hun Sen himself, the situation potentially becoming like the Gaza Strip.
Implying a prolonged tense standoff with maybe intermittent clashes. That's a grim outlook.
It is. And then there's the significant risk, the threat, really, that Cambodia could follow through on their announcement and push the dispute over those 4 areas to the ICJ.
Which could potentially lead to a repeat of the previous scenario. But for other areas like Tamon to Krobi, the Morka Triangle.
Exactly. Carrying the risk of further loss of territory for Thailand, depending on how the court rules, if it even accepts jurisdiction, which Thailand contests.
So boiling it down, what does the source say is the absolute key for de-escalation in this specific Payasadaban situation? What needs to happen first?
The core issue right now, according to the sources, is that specific Cambodian encroachment into what Thailand considers its undisputed territory. So for de-escalation at this flashpoint, the sources are clear. Cambodia must withdraw from that estimated 150 meters they've moved into clear Thai territory at the Payasadaban tree line.
So deal with that immediate transgression first, and the other disputed areas.
Those can be handled separately, the sources suggest, through the existing mechanisms, maybe designating them no man's land for now, allowing joint presence, whatever. But this specific encroachment into what's seen as sovereign Thai territory is presented as the immediate, non-negotiable point for lowering the temperature right now.
It's that specific act moving into land, historically understood and patrolled as Thai, that's the absolute red line here, according to these sources.
That's exactly the picture painted. And reflecting on that Payasadaban encroachment itself, the sources even suggest that Cambodia likely knew this specific move into undisputed Thai territory would probably provoke a military response from Thailand.
Implying it might have been part of their plan all along, a calculated move.
That's certainly a strong suggestion coming through in the material, yeah, that it wasn't accidental. So what we've really unpacked today from these sources is, well, it's a deeply complex and pretty tense situation. We started with that immediate military clash, the specific, deliberate encroachment.
Then moved through the really intricate and you could say challenging negotiation tactics used in those high-level talks.
Yeah, and then the looming threat of international legal action over multiple areas, not just one. And finally, touching on those significant domestic pressures, the politics swirling around this on the Thai side.
It really is multi-layered, isn't it? You've got on-the-ground military strategy, careful, maybe even tricky diplomatic maneuvering, these deeply held historical claims clashing.
Yeah.
Potential legal battles, and it's all intertwined with domestic politics.
And why this matters to you listening right now, it's clearly not just some distant border squabble. It really touches on fundamental principles, sovereignty, national pride. It involves economic considerations that impact trade, real people's livelihoods.
It definitely has the potential to impact wider regional stability if things escalate further.
So here's maybe a final thought, something for you to mull over based on what we've discussed from the sources today.
Go on.
The material strongly suggests that Cambodia's actions around this specific incident, particularly the nature of the encroachment, the timing, the quick pivot to broad legal threats, seem quite pre-planned. Maybe even part of a very long-term strategy, perhaps something passed down through generations to reclaim areas they view, rightly or wrongly, as historically theirs.
A kind of long-game approach.
Exactly. Could this long-game approach, combined with what appears to be Cambodia's well-prepared legal strategy this time, pose a greater or different kind of challenge to Thailand than maybe previous border disputes have?
That's definitely something to consider as you watch how this unfolds. A long game versus immediate reactions.
Interesting point.